When you make these common mistakes that I'm going to be going over, sometimes it can come across as careless, sometimes it can come across as just unprofessional, and sometimes it just comes across as you are green. You don't really know yet what you're doing. I'm Charla Larston. I've been a TV writer for almost a decade, but it wasn't that long ago that quitting my day job and moving to Hollywood was nothing but a pipe dream. After lots of failures, many mistakes, and many lessons learned, I've now written for 7 TV shows, 2 features, and sold 3 TV pilots. I've done all this through imposter syndrome, burnout, and with zero roadmap. On the Werking Writer Podcast, I pull back the curtain on breaking in and teach screenwriters and creatives how to thrive both personally and professionally. Without further ado, let's get to work. What's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of the Werking Writer Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again. If you're returning to the podcast, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Charla Larston. I'm a professional screenwriter, as well as a certified life coach and a creative coach who works with writers and creatives on helping them get their work to be the best it could possibly be. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the common screenwriting mistakes that I see when I'm reading scripts. Now, I absolutely love reading scripts, particularly from newer writers, because I'm always blown away by the creativity and just the gifts, how gifted you guys are and how interesting your work is. The reason why I want to go over these common screenwriting mistakes is because I want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward when you're sharing your work. And when you make these common mistakes that I'm going to be going over, sometimes it can come across as careless, sometimes it can come across as just unprofessional, and sometimes it just comes across as you are green. You don't really know yet what you're doing. So I want you to be able to use these tips that I'm going to be giving you so that you can look out for these common mistakes, so that you can avoid them, so that you can learn the correct way to do them. I'm going to start by talking about the common mistakes, and then I'm going to talk about how to address these common mistakes. And another disclaimer that I'll give before we jump in is that this episode is for people who are a little bit more advanced, who have some understanding of script writing jargon, because I'm not going to be going over what things mean, because all of these things you can learn in the recommendations that I'm going to give at the end of the episode. So if you are not aware of these things, don't worry. There are tools for you to learn them, but just a disclaimer that this episode is for people who know these terms, because I'm not going to be going over them. So let's jump in with the number one most common mistake that I see when I'm reading scripts, and that is poor formatting. And what I'm talking about is crazy slug lines. Your interior exterior looks crazy. I'm talking about crazy dialogue lines. Your parentheses inside of the dialogue looks wrong, or it looks like you're not really sure what to do. When you're writing montages and you're doing transitions in scenes, going in and out from day to night, I'm telling you, like, sometimes it just comes across as very green and or a lack of professionalism or a lack of care. Either you don't know or you don't care about the reader experience. And I'm just saying how it comes across. This is just a common mistake. So many people do them, but once you master it, it immediately comes across as you are more professional, as you know what you're doing, as you are a skilled writer. And that's really what you want when you're sharing your script with people. If I wasn't offering the service of reading your script and giving you notes, if this was you submitting your script for a competition, for a film festival, for a job in a writer's room, this is what will get your script dismissed. This is what will get your script dismissed, is poor formatting immediately, because it immediately shows a lack of skill or a lack of care. So you want to make sure that your formatting is on point. You want to make sure that you're using Final Draft. Even if you are a newer writer and you're using something like Celtex or you're using some other screenwriting software, eventually you want to graduate to Final Draft because ultimately that is what is used as a professional standard. So that's the number one most common mistake. It is formatting, and I'm going to talk later in the episode about how to address all of these mistakes easily. The next most common mistake that I see when I'm reading scripts is that there is either no inciting incident, there's an unclear inciting incident, or the inciting incident comes way too late. So if you're not familiar with what an inciting incident is, it is basically what kicks off the story. It's the scene that kicks off the story. And if you're writing a comedy script, the inciting incident usually happens immediately. A lot of times it happens on page 1. At the very least, it happens on page like 3, because comedy scripts are half hour. You don't have a lot of real estate. You don't have a lot of time to get the story going. So an inciting incident needs to happen immediately. So that's number 2. The no inciting incident, we never kick off the story. It's never clear that we've kicked off the story, or the kickoff for the actual story happens super late in the script. And that's another way to demonstrate either a lack of skill, and also you lose your reader very quickly when you are, particularly if you're a TV person and you're looking for the inciting incident and you don't see it, or it's unclear, or it comes super late. Just another dead giveaway that there's a skill issue there, or there's a problem with your story. I actually think for the inciting incident, that's actually a skill issue, period. The next most common mistake that I see when I'm reading scripts is withholding information. Now, I'm a culprit of this. This was one of my biggest issues when I was a newer screenwriter, was that I would withhold information because I thought that it made it more interesting. I thought that it was going to be a little bit more of a surprise. And when I'm talking about withholding information, I mean, for example, one of the scripts that I'm currently reviewing, love this script, super funny, really awesome. There's information about sibling relationship. These siblings are half siblings. They're not full-blooded siblings. And that information was withheld, even though there's no plan to kind of reveal that information later. Maybe potentially the writer thought that information wasn't necessary, but that information in the context of the script that I'm reading is important because it's about a family dynamic. It's about a sibling dynamic. So it is important if they are half siblings, if they don't have the same dad, if they don't have the same mom, if they didn't grow up in the same house. That's important because that is a family dynamic show that we're watching. So withholding that information makes it difficult for the reader to understand why certain things are important when they happen between the siblings. Does this sibling feel this way about something? That's just one example, and I hope that that's clear. But that kind of information you may potentially think is something that you could reveal later, and that it would be interesting, and that'll be kind of a surprise, but it's more functional information. That's not really something that is going to create that's not a mystery. It's not going to create any kind of interesting reveal later in the episode, particularly in the way that this show is written. I think it's actually better to just give the information up front and then reel it back in later edits when it feels like that information could potentially be an interesting reveal. But you have to put yourself in the headspace of the reader who doesn't know this world as well as you do, who doesn't have that background information about, these siblings are half siblings. And that's why they're talking about this situation in the way that they're talking about it. I think one of the things that's important for newer writers in particular, if you're noticing that you're withholding information, I would just put it out there. Especially if it's functional information, if it has to do with these people's relationships, if it has to do with something we need to know about the world so that we can understand what's going on and why it's happening. And when you watch When you watch shows, and I always refer to comedy because I'm primarily a comedy writer. When you watch any of these shows, when you watch Friends, when you watch any classic show, but I'm just going to use Friends right now. We knew very early on that Ross and Rachel were siblings. Right? We knew early on that Rachel and Monica were best friends and they went to high school with each other. We knew these people's backgrounds. We knew their history. And when an executive or a producer is reading your script or somebody that's reading your script because you're entering it into some sort of film festival or whatever, if we don't have that information, if we don't understand the ways that the characters are related, it takes away from the experience of reading your show, because that is functional information. We need to know how these people are connected. We need to know why they interact with each other the ways that they do. If you find yourself withholding information, I would just put it out there, because we need to know why. We need to know what is happening. And we need to just understand the dynamics of the characters. We need to understand your world. So if you find yourself withholding information, I feel like the best thing to do is to just put the information out there. And if it becomes clear later that information would be a really interesting and surprising reveal, then you can take it out and put it in somewhere later. But for the most part, what I notice is people are withholding literally super important information that is functional to understanding the dynamics of these characters. So that's number 3. Number 1 was poor formatting. Number 2 was no inciting incident, a late inciting incident, or an unclear inciting incident. And number 3 is withholding information. Let's jump into number 4, which is not enough story. That's another common thing that I see a lot. And when I say story, I mean not enough beats of your story. Again, we're not going to get into specifics because this is an episode for people who are a little bit more advanced. But what I literally mean is that there aren't enough beats in your story. Maybe you have an A story and it's supposed to have 20 beats, but your story has 15 or 12. Your A story has 15 or 12 beats. That means not enough is literally happening in each act. Basically, your story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. Actually, here's a little bit of an overview. If you're writing a half-hour television script, you need to have an A story, a B story, and a C story. Now, these things can fluctuate, but that is the common, most basic thing that you need to have. You need to have a big A story, a smaller B story, and a small C story. Each of these stories has a number of beats. Usually your A story has about 20 beats, and beats meaning this happens, then this happens, then this happens because that happens. So your story is literally unfolding beat by beat. And what I'm noticing is that there's just not enough of it. There's not enough happening. There's not enough twists and turns and cause and effect. There's not a end and a beginning, or a beginning, middle, and end to each story. So it's an unclear beginning, middle, and end in your A story. There's an unclear beginning, middle, and end in your B story, and there's an unclear beginning, middle, and end in your C story. Or there's just not enough of it, or it's not distinct enough. I can't tell if you have more than one story. I can't tell if you have an A story, a B story, or a C story, or if you are sure that you have an A story, a B story, and a C story. And not having enough story sometimes can be a little bit tough to determine, because if you have a half-hour script that's supposed to be between 30 and 35 pages, and you have your 35 pages, and you might feel like you have a robust story, but as a reader, and I'm reading this, I'm not seeing a clear beginning, middle, and end for your A story, your B story, and your C story. The last most common mistake or issue that I see when I'm reading television scripts is that there is no setup for the season. There's no seeds planted. There's nothing that is launching us into the season. So I would say that maybe this is the most common pilot error, the most common error I see in pilots. And that is not setting us up for the season, not having something to launch us into the season. It's a very closed pilot, meaning that there's a beginning, middle, and end, and that's it. But you have to remember when you're writing a television script that you are writing for multiple episodes. You're setting us up for a whole season. You're potentially setting us up for a whole series. So we have to have something that launches us into the season, that launches us into the series. What story are we going to be following? Are we going to be following a love story? Are we going to be following somebody who's trying to get it, like Atlanta? We're following Earn trying to make it. Or are we following, trying to think of different episodes of things? In Grand Crew, we're following a group of people trying to find love as well as trying to make a new bar their home. It can be simple. It doesn't have to be complex. Your seeds planted don't have to be complex. They can always be simple. But if you're writing a television script, if you're writing the pilot of a television script and there's no seed planted, there's nothing that makes us excited to see the next episode. That is one of the fastest ways to get your script dismissed. Not completely, but it's definitely something that will have to be there to get the reader excited. If you are selling this script, if you are selling a show idea, even in the pitch room, you're going to be telling them the seeds planted in the pilot that's going to get you to the next episode and to the rest of the season. So those are the common mistakes that I see. It is poor formatting. It is no unclear inciting incident or inciting incident that comes too late. It is withholding information, not enough story, and no setup or seeds planted for the rest of the season. So how do you address these problems? Don't worry. It's easy, actually. A lot of these problems can be addressed simply by reading scripts. Read scripts, read scripts, read scripts, read professional scripts. You can find scripts all over the internet. The internet is inundated with free scripts. You can go to the WJ library and read scripts. There's so many places that you can go to read scripts. I have Fleabag, the scriptures book. I have a Seinfeld book. You can literally read scripts in book form. They're available everywhere. Just read scripts and you'll immediately get a sense of how formatting works, how transitions work, how things are written in dialogue. It will give you such a better idea of how scripts formatting goes, how script transitions go. It's crazy. So just read scripts. I would recommend, if you are writing a script currently, I would recommend reading a script a day. If you have the time to read a script a day, particularly if you're reading a script that's similar to the tone and style of the show that you're writing, I say read a script a day and it keeps bad formatting away. You're welcome for that one. The next thing that you can do is take a class. I have Zero to Pilot available online on demand. You can take that class solo. I have scripts in the course because, of course, you're going to be reading scripts in that course, of course. Every script writing course you have, you're probably reading a script because that's how important and powerful reading professional scripts are, because it gives you an idea of pacing, it gives you an idea of formatting, it gives you an idea of voice and tone and how to literally write out scenes that you want. So you get nothing but positivity from reading scripts. Also, reading scripts is free. You don't have to sign up for a class to do that, but every good screenwriting class that you're going to be in is most likely going to require that you read a script. So number one is reading scripts. Number two is taking a class. I mentioned that Zero to Pilot is my class. There's other great screenwriting classes out there. And my class is asynchronous. It is totally online and you take it by yourself, but you can sign up for one-on-ones. You can do Zero to Pilot plus one-on-ones where I work with you through each step of the class and I read and give feedback on your work when you're taking it. So that's an option. And then the last thing that you can do is to find a trusted reader. someone who is really understanding of your level, particularly if you're new, making it clear that you're just getting started, you don't really know a lot, and you just have this idea and you want to get it out there so that you don't feel judged if your formatting isn't perfect, if there's story mistakes in there. Don't worry about your level. It's really about trying to improve, trying to be better, trying to acquire the skill set, because it is a skill set. And the more you know, the more confident you get with your screenwriting, the more confident you get with your script, and the more likely it is that your script is perceived as professional instead of as green and as careless and as someone who just doesn't know what they're doing. So I hope that was helpful to you. You can let me know in the comments if there are other issues that you think that are common in screenwriting that you've seen, and maybe I can do an episode on that. That's all I've got for you today. Until next time, get out there, get to work. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, share, or leave a comment for the algorithm gods.